All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Make these into a playlist. Yeah, appreciate it. Now we get to see, yep, how loud I turned that up. Great. First of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you so much for joining us, both virtually and in person. This is Left Bank Books, presenting tonight's special guest, Ignatz winner and Herblock Prize finalist, Mattie Lubchansky, in conversation with some very special friends of Left Bank, author S.L. Coney, and illustrator and former LBB bookseller, Phoebe Santalla. These wonderful folks will be discussing the book described by Lilly Wachowski as a brilliant saga and how-to of trans survival, and has one of my favorite lines in a book review ever: "I giggled so hard I blew snot bubbles." Mattie's latest, The Wonderful Boys Weekend. From the award-winning cartoonist and editor at the Nib, Boys Weekend is a hilarious trans final girl horror graphic novel about a bachelor party gone very, very wrong. Boys Weekend is part satire and part horror, but explores what it is like to exist as a trans femme person in a man's world, the difficulty of maintaining friendships through transition, and the more cult-like effects of masculinity, hustle culture, and capitalism. As you may have seen on our sign outside, we're going to talk about gender and capitalism today. This is all done through the vibrant lens of a surreal, scary, and immensely imaginative romp. And without giving anything away, I reread it last night, and it made me want to hug all of my friends. All right, tonight's event is only possible because of your support, and so now I get to thank you for a few minutes. When you support Left Bank Books, your money goes directly into the local economy. You help us keep our bookstore open, our streets paved, our libraries funded, our parks free, and the wonderful booksellers fed, so we thank you. And I would just go ahead and like to extend a special thank you to each of you for choosing to support one of your local bookstores. We really appreciate it. My name is Danielle King. I'm our general manager and some other stuff. I get to help out our fantastic staff along with our wonderful event coordinator, Shane Mullen, put on hundreds of events like this every year. Check out our event calendar and on our website for a full list of our programming. And now for tonight's guests, who are going to somehow manage to make it through this conversation with only 2 mics. Give them thanks in advance. Mattie Lubchansky is a cartoonist and illustrator and the associate editor of thenib.com. They are also an Ignatz winner themselves, and Herblock Prize finalist, and the author of the also excellent The Antifa Super Soldier Cookbook. S.L. Coney used to be an academic, if I'm not mistaken. We understand, and we are here with you in your survival. Coney's work has appeared in St. Louis Noir, The Best American Mystery Stories, and Gambit Magazine, and their debut novel, Wild Spaces, has received rave reviews from the likes of Alma Katsu, Paul Tremblay, and Laura Benedict. And Phoebe Santalla is a second-year grad student of illustration and visual culture at WashU's Sam Fox School, whose work is focused on creating imagery around some of the queer history materials in the mapping LGBTQ+ St. Louis archives. She's interested in the overlapping context of the personal narrative and the formation of more expansive queer history. Also has not yet been free of academia, if you can. All right, y'all are awesome. These are bad jokes, thank you for laughing. On behalf of Left Bank Books, please help me give a warm welcome to our friends Mattie Lubchansky, S.L. Coney, and Phoebe Santalla for a discussion of the wonderful, rollicking, spooky, and affirming Boys Weekend.
Got it. Thank you so much for thank you so much for coming out, everybody. And thank you too for joining.
Yeah, really appreciate it. Yeah, so I guess we'll just dive right into all of this. So I guess I wanted to ask you, just right off the bat, why satire? Like, what about satire is drawing you in so thoroughly?
I think it was, so, you know, when I first got into comics, I was very much of the mind that I wanted to do like long form fiction. As there's an ungoogleable webcomic I attempted near late 2000s, but then I sort of like fell kind of ass backwards into doing like political cartoons every week for the Nib. And they hired me after seeing some of like my humor strips I was doing at the time. So, and I've always been a very political person who just sort of like suffused itself into my work. And I guess, you know, I didn't set out to write this book as a satire necessarily. I like to think of it as having just more like satirical elements in it. But it's just always going to be there, I think, just in the way that I see the world functioning. It's always, like, I've always sort of loved the more satirical sci-fi novels. It's always been like something I've been very into. Like, I was like following it as a kid. I was thinking a lot about Margaret Atwood's Oryx and Crake when I was writing this book, which is like more serious in this book, but it is like kind of goofy. It's got a lot of satirical stuff in it. Margaret Atwood has never said anything problematic. I'm not worried about that. Everything she says is great. Hi, Peggy. I hope you're watching. Stupid. Well, you know, like I just sort of like, it just sort of happens when I go to put pen to paper, you know.
Yeah, I can imagine it's just so much absurdity going on in the world. It's hard not to point at it when you're making something. And I guess kind of following up with that is that not a lot of your work in the past hasn't necessarily dealt on the side of horror. And how did that end up coming about in this one?
Yeah, so this book came about when, so I kind of, it happened to me. The whole thing, 100%. This is actually all drawn from film. No, like I was like in the middle of coming out, and my friend asked me to be his best man at his wedding, and I said yes. And then like 6 months later, I was like, oh, my wedding trans, and he was like, you want to call it something else at the wedding? And I was like, I don't want to talk to your parents about this, so it's fine. And I just put up with it. But like during all this happening, we did go to Las Vegas for his bachelor party because it's all my friends from engineering school. Yeah, you look at me, engineering school for sure. But like, so it was like so it was me and the boys on the trip, right? And I got back and I was like trying to process this, and so much of it was me not being forthright with the people I was with about what I needed or what I wanted, because I was a coward, you know. And yeah, so I got back and I was trying to process what had happened. And I was like, I'm going to do like a little mini comic about it, you know, about like what this experience was like on bringing to SPX or whatever. And I started writing it. I was going to do like a 16-page, like, sad drawings of me moping around Las Vegas having like an existential meltdown, because it's maybe the worst place on earth. I'm sorry if you like Las Vegas.
It's only been in Reno.
Oh.
I just gotta assume it's like bigger Reno.
Yeah. Reno seems at least like it's got some dirtbag weird stuff to it, which like Vegas definitely has, but I was not allowed to go there because I was with all these folks. But so I started writing this like mini comic about it, and then it just started spiraling out of control, and just horror, like sci-fi horror, just seemed to sort of like naturally stem out of me externalizing all this stuff. And it was like the idea of a cult just sort of came to me, and then it just really spun out from there. And then like 6 months later, I had like a full-length novel idea that had like 8,000 more ideas in it, you know.
So you're talking about, you know, having it in Las Vegas and everything, and like, one of the things that really struck me about this was the setting. Like, the setting is amazing. It's so full out dystopian, and yet like obviously recognizable. And everything can go there, like cannibalism, like whatever, right?
Yeah.
And I'm just like, oh my gosh. So like, can you talk a little bit about how like it is this, I guess to some people, paradise of like go and do whatever you want to do, but there's such like a drive for conformity.
Yeah.
Can you talk about that juxtaposition a little bit?
Oh, totally. So, well, first, like the setting generally, I was just trying to convey to the reader, even a reader that like say likes going to Las Vegas, the sheer terror that it presented to me. You know, I was thinking a lot about that book, one of my favorite books, The Dispossessed, Fire Soul Liquid. It's about like a guy experiencing capitalism for the first time. You know, he comes from the moon, and he's an anarchist on the anarchist moon. He comes to Earth, you know, the anomaly for Earth, and he's like, oh God, like, you live like this. And that was me going to Vegas. I was like, this is what America's like? This is crazy. This is what capitalism is like? That's wild. So I was just trying to sort of convey that. But in terms of the juxtaposition of like, a friend of mine put it really well to me, which was like, it's anything goes, but for who, you know? And to me, that's the crux of like the capitalist sort of expression of the book, or the anti-capitalist expression of it, which is like, you know, if you put these people in charge, they want to do whatever they want to do, but it's not like important to, like, as long as within certain bounds of these existing social taboos that already exist, because this sort of what do you call bigotry, that's like it's baked into capitalism, right? Because you need an underclass, whether it be racialized, gendered, cis, whatever, like that needs to exist for capitalism to exist, because you need someone sort of like propping the whole endeavor up. So like, why would those people get to do what they want? This is for, you know, this is an island just for the boys. Yeah.
And so like the elements and the themes surrounding gender and personhood, of course, running all through this, and like, yeah, everything is weaved together so well, and it's all so horrific. Like, you know, like I spent the entire time, and she gets into El Campo really early in the book. I'm just so uncomfortable with the entire time.
Yeah.
And just so horrific. And can you talk a little bit about weaving those elements together?
Yeah, so like originally, I wanted to open the book, they're just there, they landed, and they're there. And then things get worse and worse and worse until it's over. I showed that to a friend of mine, and he was like, you can't do that. It's miserable. This is just like torture. It's not, not like I need things to be fun, because nothing's fun to me, but, what was I saying? Oh, like I don't need it to be fun, but I need this person to feel real and to have like, why are they there? It was what everyone kept asking me. So I was like, okay, I gotta show like their home life, like Sammie's home life. So I have them at home, at work, sort of like, oh, like they have friends that they like, a job that is fine, and a partner that they like, right? So that's all like sort of, it was important to me to establish this sort of like safe base for them to be operating from. And then in terms of weaving everything together, I sort of, it was always in my mind sort of like, you know, it's not a picaresque or anything, but the idea of it being this very episodic thing, just every time it just adds another layer of crap being piled on our poor girl. And so that was just, I don't know, it was always that way to me, that it was just sort of like everything's going on, and then there's this growing other threat happening, and I just tried to sort of like every 15 pages or so be like, by the way, remember this, remember that, yeah. Like maybe it's just someone in the background wearing a vest, maybe it's you see something in the water,
And so I'm kind of following up on the character of Sammie. It seems like there's some similarities.
I'm not sure.
Deny them all.
At the book launch event for this book when it came out in June, my friend Tuck was moderating, called the main character Mattie Lubchansky. So I'll never forgive him.
I was gonna say, because you put yourself in a lot of work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I guess for this story, it's a larger narrative about a personal experience. Was there a point where you sort of had to manage, you know, what's going to be fictionalized and what's going to be your like vulnerable, like revealing parts of yourself and everything? I feel like that's kind of the hard thing that you're trying to about.
Yeah, you know, I took a lot of myself out of the book at one point, in terms of like what Sammie is like. I think there are a lot more, you know, I was just sort of, it was like this is me at like my most cowardly, basically. It was the sort of, it was me if I knew less about myself, but more about more about nothing, I don't know, like just sort of something that was a little more careful, which is what I was like at the time. And it was very neat just like reflecting on that sort of period of like early coming out. You know, like the boys are all fictionalized. There's some stuff in there that's like stuff people in my life have said to me verbatim coming out. There's like one guy, Farhead, who's just sort of like a bucket of all the things people have actually said to me in my life. It's just they all come right out of his mouth. But like there's no like one-to-one stuff that happens. I'll say crucially, I have glasses and Sammie doesn't. And my wife, Jaya, does not have glasses, and in the book, Mia does. So it's really easy to keep us apart, I think. I think it's a really clever little author's trick that I did.
Really drawing the dividing line of reality and not.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great, that's great. So, so I guess kind of running off that, like, you're doing a lot of work with vulnerability and everything. I mean, just like, is there any like deciding factor that like drew the line for you on like what not to include by yourself?
Yeah, I didn't want to include anything about like my actual relationships with my friends, because that's my business, you know, like the guys that I went on this trip with, I talked to them about this. Like it was actually kind of very therapeutic to be like, and now you have to talk to your fucking friends about this now. Like you have to, because they're gonna, otherwise the book's gonna come out and they're gonna be like, what the fuck? So it was actually sort of like, I had to like text everybody and be like, listen, you know, it was very nice. Like I went on book tour and I've been on book tour forever now. And the first like leg of it, every city that I've gone to that has a boy from the book living in it, they've been at an event. Like it's been very nice. You know, I dedicated the book to them. So it's like, you know, and especially me and the guy at the bachelor party was have a much different relationship than one's depicted in the book. Like I did a lot of sort of like drawing out the worst aspects of myself and other people, basically to make, because otherwise the situation would be a lot less interesting to read.
Right.
You know, people just, you know, it's like those movies that you're like, oh, if you just talk to each other, nothing would have happened. It's like, well, that's not a very interesting movie now, is it? You know? Communication is bad for plots, basically.
That makes sense. Yeah, let's check out.
So we were talking a little bit earlier before the event, and you brought up Aaron in the book. And there is a scene in this book involving Aaron and Sammie that like hurt. It hurt like in a really good way.
Good.
It hurt, yes. But like, and I get all of that, but like, can we talk about Aaron a minute?
Yeah.
Just like, so can we talk about what happens? Is that going to give away?
Yeah, I mean, it's, I don't know. Are we really worried about spoilers? I don't know. It's fine.
Okay. But like, Aaron just
Yeah.
hauls off and blows her phone away.
Yeah.
And like, just, I don't know, that
She hates
was
herself.
that was horrific to me in another
Yeah.
way.
So that whole sequence was maybe the last thing that went in the book. I had sort of like, when I was writing it, I was like, and then chapter 7, something emotional happens, and I wrote the rest of the book. And I was like, I gotta write that down. And the whole like, you know, dangerous game that is yourself thing was an idea I had just for a book on its own. And I was like, that's not a whole book. That's, you know, 20 pages of a book. So I was like, oh, that's a great idea. And I kind of just picked it up and moved it. Because of course there'd be a business that exists in this horrible place, right? Where life is cheap and like, you know, maniacs run the place. Yeah, so, you know, I sort of, the idea of Aaron there is like the shadow Sammie. It's like, you know, and what I was thinking a lot about was, so in my experience talking to people, because I have talked to cis people before, yeah, and you know, like cis men don't think about their gender generally. This is a generalization, but like, you know, for most cis guys who are straight, anyways, they get up in the morning and they just go about their day, and no one is like putting their gender on them in a way. Whereas like cis women have to think about it because the world is telling them to think about it. There's something about the way, the way society is set up. Cis women are forced to think about their gender all the time. So like the idea that like all these boys are different kinds of boys, but they all don't understand Sammie in the same way. So to me, it was like to have a different kind of frisson there, where there's this person who like has thought about her gender and is like, well, I don't want to change it, but it sucks to be here. And she's mad about it and she hates herself because of it instead of getting mad at society, right? And thinks that she can play this game to win it. So she's there and like, and this is just her, she thinks she's acting like she's alone basically, because Sammie's not a person to her, because, and yeah, so she just, she sees her clone, she's just like, yeah, I'll shoot this bitch in the head. Like I'm done with her. Like, it's a nice little, and it's this thing where like, oh man, it actually could have been a very nice shared moment because they are both mad at themselves for different, very, vastly different reasons. But that just, it gets so close.
And she's an extremely unlikable character. The entire book.
Yeah, she's a little sourpuss. But like that's because it's that thing where she sees another girl. It's like, well, I gotta jostle, for position, but like you're easy because something's wrong with you or whatever. So like it's this idea of like, oh, we're stuck we have to do like a higher, like I'm the girl and I'm with the guys, right? There's no other room. And this is the way that I think a lot of the time when there is a group of guys with like a single girl in it, there are about other women. So the idea that there's this like, like goblin that shows up, it's like trying to upend the whole thing. It's very upsetting for her. So we never see her being even a little bit good to anybody about anything.
Okay, so kind of sticking on this topic, just the experience of there are clones in this book, big spoiler. Just the experience of being a trans person and kind of wrestling with this moment of like sort of like untethered to temporality, where you're like wrestling with this like past version of yourself, and also trying to find some sort of acceptance for that, and also like deeply don't want to be associated with part of that. Like I think this moment just like really was such an intense and just like powerful personally like reflection of that was I don't know, was that cathartic for you?
It's very strange because like most of the time I'm not like oh, I just like sit there and let the characters take me where they want to go, and I learned so much about Van writing the book. Like that's just not how I write. But like that sequence just sort of it did kind of write itself, and it just sort of happened, and all that stuff about like, because I think I was writing it in a time where I was like still really grappling with, because I came out, I was pretty old already. I was in my mid-30s. So old. They're as old as anyone's ever been. But I think especially you go to like a lot of trans spaces and there's so many 22-year-olds there, and I'm so happy for them. But at some point you're like, all right, well, it sucks for me. I wish because of when I was born, it just wasn't the language wasn't there for me, and I couldn't. It's a dumb thing about like the word blue doesn't show up in literature until the dye for blue is invented. It's a thing where you don't know. I didn't have a word for why I was so uncomfortable all the fucking time. The way that transness was treated when I was a kid was just a completely different ballgame. And so I was just grappling with a lot of like, oh man, I wish I knew when I was younger. There's all this lost time. I could have had like a nice 20s that I enjoyed. But it's sort of like, well, that person can't be alive long enough, and that's an important thing to remember. And I was just sort of like, I think I was very much grappling with that at the time. Not the well-adjusted, very calm person you see yourself, Got it all together.
It's all figured out now.
Yeah, I'm done.
Everything's, it's
Yeah.
over.
I'm actually walking into the river after this. And just,
I know, the experience of coming on this trans, and it's like, I don't know, I was 27,
yeah.
and I was immediately treated like, oh, you're trans older. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know anything, but
Yeah, like I have so many friends that are 5 or 10 years younger than me, that have been out longer than me.
yeah.
And I'm like, well, I like ask you for advice.
Yeah.
Awful.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so you were talking about your process a little bit there. The story does not write itself. So does this mean like you're a meticulous planner? Did you like? Yeah. Did you know how this was all going to work out, even though you had that like emotional moment out unwritten?
Yeah, I'm like a really fastidious outliner. Just, I think especially with something like this, where you're trying to sell a graphic novel, and you're like, well, it's going to be this many pages, and I don't want to go too far over because then they'll be like, you got to cut pages, and I don't want to do that in a script. So I did a lot, I did really meticulous outlining, and that's just how I work. I'm very much I got to break it down to math and do I need to pace it. I'm 5 pages for this, 10 pages for this, 5 pages for this. Yeah. So I kind of knew this book, the process of it is I had the plot first, and then I was like, I had to start over and do I had to actually start with characters and then fit them into this plot, and then and the plot changed itself completely, but it was that's the starting point. It's the opposite of there's an old Gretchen Felker Martin tweet I think about all the time, where she's how to write a book. It's first think of a gay little man, second give him a problem. And I think that's not how I wrote this book at all. Then the book that I'm working on now, that's what I did. I thought of a gay little man, and then I thought of some problems. But it's a much different sort of, it's like I'm learning how to write all over again, because this was a completely different sort of experience.
So in thinking about the emotional journey and talking about where it ends, I don't want to give anything away, but obviously deeply touching, deeply affecting, and Sammie is my new favorite final girl. Okay. So you did something. You helped me see Graham Jones, which was but in thinking about the monster, I love the monster. So
I love him, poor guy.
right?
He gets kind of a short shrift, I think.
Yeah, but poor Dan. I didn't like Dan.
Dan, which Dan?
The one that
It's always two of one guy. You know this.
the one who had the
Tall Dan.
yeah.
Uh-huh.
Was there some symbolism in the way that monster appeared?
Yeah, I think I've always been really, it was always, there's two kinds of ways that I end up writing a comic, and one of them is I've just got an image in my head. And what does that mean? Where does it come from? And I had that just there, and it was just there, and I was well, how do I fit this into what's going on? And it was actually very good, because the idea of this happened to Tall Dan, whose last initial I cannot remember. This happens to him because he's perceived as weak, basically, right? Because he's subordinate to the short Dan and the hierarchy of Dans. And that's this could happen to Sammie, right? And the idea of sort of something in your body that you don't want, was sort of a powerful image to me. It's not exactly ripped from it, but it's alien, that sort of, but the idea of something parasitic in you, right? That they're passing around, and just there's a lot of sort of it's this thing growing from under the island. It's this thing growing inside of people. It's it's coming for but it's something that already lives inside of it, right? And the monster, it sounds dumb to say, but the monster's capitalism, it's just sort of, it's everything. It's this threatening, burbling thing that's waiting to kill you, as soon as it can.
So it is, and just the use of like the jackets all over the place is pretty brilliant, because it just like, you see it and it's just everywhere.
Yeah, I wanted to think of like a visual language to sort of be like, well, how do you know that these people are turning, right? That's in a way that is innocuous to your average person. If they're not paying, if they're just like, oh yeah, you go to a place like this, everyone's wearing like swag, right? Everyone looks like they're in like downtown San Francisco with their little swaggy vests, you know, like going to like a professional conference. So yeah, just like, you know, you look in the background, it just like starts popping up more and more, and it was just sort of, for me, like a very easy, it felt sort of natural to have that kind of thing. My dream is to make them one day. A piece of clothing I would never want to wear, but.
Yeah, and so you've got, like, I love the use of color. You've got the gray vest, and then you've contrasted that with Sammie's dress, which is this beautiful bright red. And like, I just want her to put that on so bad.
Yeah, that was a nice moment, I think. That was like a nice little, I was like, I like did a pass of writing the book where I was like, I have to put in like 4 nice things that happened in the first person. Because I feel like I've been mean.
Yeah, I had a moment where you're like talking about Sammie and like the most cowardice form and everything. I was like, I don't know, I would dodge some weird bullets by like squirm my way by not like communicating or anything like that.
No.
I feel like.
You never know how it's gonna go. Like it could be like a lot of the time if someone's being crappy to you in your life and they're a close friend or a family member, you know, a lot of time the best case is they just listen and then are still bad. You know, the worst case is like so bad, right? Especially if you're like talking to a man, you know, like you never know how things are gonna go. So it's like, yeah, that survival instinct is actually kind of important. But like, they shouldn't have gone at all, is the thing. You know, like, I shouldn't have gone on the trip, Sammie shouldn't have gone, there's no reason. Yeah, what are you trying to prove?
What?
Like, well, like, what are you, not you. What are they trying to do? Sorry, what are you trying to do? Tell me.
Just want me to be here. Okay, so you have this like meticulous process, like planning things out, and this, I think it really does show through with like the tests and everything, because as time goes on, like I feel like I'm in a moment where I'm like constantly like going back, like, wait, something's changed, something has changed, something's different now.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess how much research does it have to do? Because I know it's about like a personal experience and everything, but you're looking into things like talking about like, well, because you don't really need research capitalism, it's happening all around us.
Yeah.
Like horror tropes and goofy advertisements and stuff.
Yeah, the advertisements were really just a way to keep myself entertained while I was working, you know, because like a graphic novel, while it is, you know, like my dream to keep making them, they are kind of a slog, you know, like, because you outline it, or you like have an idea, and then you outline it, and then you write a whole script, and then you pencil it, and you color it, or you ink it, and you color it, and it's like, and by the time the book is done, I've seen that page 10 times, you know, I've thought about what that page is so much, and I'm just sick of it. So there's a lot of just like, well, I'm just gonna put in some little details to make myself laugh, or keep it interesting, or whatever, or like, you know, there's like messages for friends and like references to things that I like, you know, but it was also just this, to me, a way to do some like subtle world building, but mostly like tone setting, just to sort of like for the heightened reality of the thing, to sort of like put you there. I'm so sorry, what was your question? I got away from it.
I was just talking about like, what's the research process?
Oh, there's no research. So I mean, I wasn't really doing too much research. I was doing a lot of like, I was just watching a lot of horror movies while I was at something on while I'm drawing, and it was just sort of like, for things like camera angles and lighting. And I was watching a lot of like, when I was writing it, I was trying to watch some more Final Girl stuff to just sort of like, I don't want to just do it, but the sort of like, the way by which those movies operate is very, well known to operate within that was nice.
Yeah. So you said you're going through a page like 10 times and everything. So how many like iterations and editing, like did parts get chopped? Did parts have to be rearranged in here?
Yeah, I did mostly adding on this book, to be honest. My editor, Anna, my co-founder at Headdown was great. And I try to, because I've done so much comic editing, I was really pushing Nikki about let's just get this all edited in the script phase, because the more you go into the book, the harder it is to make changes. It's really easy to move words around in a Google Doc. It's really hard to redraw a panel or re-ink a panel or whatever it is. So there's some things like continuity stuff that I did really pay attention to. It was mostly just adding scenes to sort of get some character beats really down. I think I added those phone calls back home late in the writing process, but that's most of the editing happened there really.
Yeah, that's good. The phone calls that happened throughout the thing, I think really connected back to the beginning, and I feel like that's really important to the contrast.
Yeah, that was something I cracked late, and I was like, oh, that changes the entire tone of the thing in a way that something wasn't working, and I figured it out. Yeah.
So we've mentioned movies a couple of times. We've talked Final Girls. You mentioned Alien. Do you like horror? And if so, what is your favorite type of horror?
Oh boy. I was a real baby until about 5-6 years ago. What's my favorite type? I mean, my favorite horror movie is probably Alien. It's I really like science, scary science fiction stuff is always very appealing to me. I'm a defender of the late Ridley Scott Alien prequels, the newer ones. I don't know, I just love sort of stuff with a real sense of dread and to it that's sort of creeping. These are all very basic answers, but I have a real gap in my horror movie watching because I was such a baby for so long. But I love The Shining. I love the sort of building tension sort of stuff. I don't like jump scares. Those are kind of, to me, less interesting.
Yeah. Okay. Because we mentioned the dystopian atmosphere within El Campo, and I've noticed within some of your other work as well, there is a dystopian feel to the world that you're working in. So I just wonder, is that because that is something you like in your fiction, or is that something inspired by real life?
Yeah, it's always, dystopias have always been very appealing to me to think about. Just sort of, or at least the next book I'm working on now is about a utopian society. And just, to me, it's the same idea, right? It's the idea of how is civilization put together? What does it mean? What are we doing? All this stuff in Boys Weekend is all this stuff. It's about what people are doing to themselves, right? There's no external pressure here. They're not responding to anything. There's no threat, whatever. These are all just problems people have put on themselves, really. And I just think a lot about resources and community and society and these sort of how do we arrange ourselves? I think a lot about history a lot, and so and it's funny that the sort of Mad Max dystopia stuff that's in a lot of the political work was me and Matt Bors, who ran the Nib. We just started doing that. We had a shared universe that we wrote out the next 300 years of human history. And we would just place things wherever we want on the timeline. And so much of that was just doing political cartoons in 2017, because just things were they moved so fast, and there were and there was just too many people paying attention to the news in an insane way. That don't normally pay attention to the news and don't know how to process it and say really out-of-pocket things. Or, people don't have any real politics being oh, well, just the aesthetics of this guy freaked me out, And it was just so hard to satirize, right? So to do that, we were just sort of well, how do I strip away all the details of this? And I don't like drawing congressmen's faces. I don't care, it's not interesting to me. To be to do a comic that's did you hear what Lauren Boebert said this week? I don't care what Lauren Boebert said this week. It's not interesting to me. It's more interesting to be well, what does she represent? What does, whatever. And the idea of this wasteland, which is where we just plop anything and just talk about it that way. So I started thinking about it a lot around men, and it's just sort of like seeped into my other work, I think. That I do love Mad Max a lot.
Mad Max is great. Also, it's Almost. If you haven't watched
I've
it,
not seen that.
you should watch that.
Okay.
It's good. It's a good horror movie. I just distracted myself. Almost. Oh yeah, I mean, talking about dystopia, it's really interesting because I feel like part of this like genderqueer trans experience is that you, at a lot of times, exist in a dystopia that's only like happening to you, really. And so I guess, have you found these things like interweaving? Because I mean, to me, like you look at satire, you look at dystopia, you look at horror and everything. And there's like so many elements of this that cross into like the genderqueer narrative.
Yeah, I think it's actually interesting. Like not interesting. That like when I first started working on the book to when it came out, like was a real sharp decline in the treatment of trans people in this country, like really sharp. Because these things take a long time to make, like come out, whatever.
Yeah.
Like I started pitching this book or getting this book together in 2019, 2020. So like, there's, since then there's been a big, we were mostly not getting left alone, but like comparatively we were. And I think, but just in general about the sort of setting and these feelings and being trans, I think there is something about being a trans person generally, that it does sort of like, it forces you to think about, you go through the thing where you're like, well, I'm going to think about myself nonstop for 18 months. Like I'm going to sit around, I'm being conservative. But, there's definitely a time where like you necessarily become very selfish for a while. And but then you're like, man, my entire sense of self has been completely upended. It's been evaporated. I've rebuilt myself from scratch. And then you're like, what else do I have to do this to? Like, what else am I wrong about? And it just sort of forces you to look at everything with this sort of like new perspective, like, and you become like a new person a little bit. And it's just sort of like, it's the guy from the Dispossessed landing on the capitalism planet. You're like, you just look around and everything is this completely different tinge to it.
Yeah, and I think that is very much shown in Voice Weekend. Like, you're in this scenario where it's like, oh, here's this like capitalist Las Vegas society, and it almost feels like it should be blunt, but it's so like, I don't know, it's so just like straightforward and clear that it's like, oh wow, okay, wow, we're really in this.
Yeah, you feel crazy all the time, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think this is true for like basically anyone belonging to any marginalized group, really, right? Like, there's something about being trans that's so like, well, I'm going to stop and restart my life. That's a little different, but anyone can tell you that it's just sort of like you have this truth that is real, and everyone around you is acting like the universe is set up different, and it's totally crazy making.
Yeah, and I mean, you're how you're being perceived and how you're moving through the world is often at odds with how you know yourself to be. I feel like that is honestly kind of a recurring theme in here. It's just like the sense of reality is almost it's like, it feels like it's gaslighting Sammie the entire time.
Yeah.
And so speaking of that, the gaslighting and like the fact that like, I feel like the trans experience, you really have to face your past.
Yeah.
In a way that I think maybe other people don't have to do. And you've got this cult element in the book that like I have to ask because it is a creepy phrase. I love it. Orbs within orbs. Orbs within orbs within orbs. Like
He comes. Yeah, I don't know.
yeah, I don't know. Like I'm just sitting
It
here.
just sounded cool.
It does sound cool. It sounds cool.
I was just like, what would a really crazed person, the idea that like the world, like there's like a new world waiting for you. I think it's easy to say Lovecraftian or whatever. But like the idea of just your mind cracking into it, that something is really interesting to me more than anything else about Lovecraft. Another person who said nothing problematic. But like, I've never really read too much of Lovecraft because it is like the racism is so baked into it that it's really hard to, but like the idea of something like that there is like this horror that you can't even like look at. And the idea that like you can have, you become sort of like inundated to this thing that just makes your brain stop working in a way that is legible to other human beings is interesting to me. And to me, like these people who join this cult and then all of a sudden they like see the universe in a different way. Is I think what I was trying to get at really. And yeah, orbs within orbs just sounded cool.
So I think, and so I think the thing that I like, honestly, I've never read much Lovecraft either.
But I feel like we all got the gist as a society.
It's so prevalent. Like,
Yeah.
It's so prevalent in other works. But like, the idea that you have some knowledge, or that you have received some knowledge that other people don't have. And then this knowledge, like, can drive you nuts, right? And like you're seeing a reality that others are. I do feel like that very much kind of like played into the trans experience.
Yeah, it's like this mirror version of it, where it's like, well, this like Sammie did have their mind cracked open, and now they see things in a new way that are different and makes their brain less legible for the people around them, but they're right. Whereas like all these other guys are like, this happened to them, but the thing that's happening to them is like nonsense. Like it is intentionally very much like out of the box cult stuff. Like it's not like I didn't put almost no thought into how the cult functions, into its rituals or the language or what the monster is doing, or if it's like why it's there. Like it's just not. It was just sort of like, yeah, that's just sort of what this other stuff is to me. It's just like the way it's just there, and it's not my problem.
Yeah, the cult elements, them being so straightforward and everything like that, I feel like it does very much like sell that trans narrative, like, and now the world looks totally different to you, and it's claiming to be normal, and it's wildly going off the rails.
Yeah, there's it's funny, like I think this book, a lot of it is I did around the time that I went to this party or earlier, I don't know when it was, I did like it was a 4-panel comic like years ago. It was about like a bunch of people going to, like they're all at the airport going to a bachelor party, but they're all like describing where they're going as the plane's going to hell. And all the guys, and it's just, or hell, like sort of like they're taking the plane to Pandemonium or wherever, and all the guys are like jumping up and down, like we're gonna go to like the, we're gonna get in the boiling pits, we're gonna get set on fire, it's gonna rock, dude. Like they're all just like, yeah, skeleton parade, and it's just like sort of this book's just the 230-page version of that 4-panel comic.
Yeah, it seems like a kind of like a survival guide to like just like trying to dodge your way through like capitalism and consuming itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean that's the other thing about the monster being capitalism, right? Is that the sort of idea that at one point it does become completely unsustainable and will kill us all.
Well, okay, I don't want to go wrong.
What about the world?
Yeah, turns out I no big reveals about the world.
Do we have any audience questions? If not, I can give y'all 5 more minutes. If you have some last thoughts.
Last thoughts. Any last thoughts? Any last thoughts?
I mean, I always have thoughts.
Okay.
The question is whether they're appropriate thoughts, but we'll find out.
Why? Why?
Yeah, okay, so, was there something in this book that you should, like, I know when I write, there's always something I struggle really hard with, always. Is there something you struggle really hard with, and if so, what was it?
It was the character of Adam, the guy whose party it is. I had such a hard time with him because I was sort of like, because he needs to be, I didn't want him to just be my friend because I didn't want to do that to my friend, you know? And it's like, it's a really good way to ruin relationships with people. This is a friend of mine that I've had for 20 years now. Like, I didn't want to do that to him. He is like a fundamentally a good person. And again, like I said before, did ask me if I wanted to change, I didn't want to be the best man anymore. And I was the one that said, I'll just do it. And I put on a tuxedo and didn't think about it, you know, for the day. Because I didn't want to talk to his mom about it. But like, you know, yeah, so like I think writing him was really hard because it was sort of like invent the guy from scratch. And then I had to invent their relationship from scratch. And it was like sort of, for the rest of it being so personal, this big pit of impersonal stuff right in the middle of it that I had to sort of figure out what the center of that was, and like how their relationship works and why is Sammie there? Like that was always the question. Like almost every draft of the book until the last one. It's like, why is Sammie there? What, you know, like I didn't make it seem like they felt like they owed Adam something. And I hope I got there, but like that was the thing that I was really dragging my ass on all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely got there, like, you know, as I mentioned earlier, the whole time, I'm just like, oh no, this is uncomfortable, please go home and put on the dress and be yourself. But like, I also totally understood why she was there. So I think you did that really well, and it was very aggravating because I didn't like him very much.
Yeah, you know, I very intentionally did not like show them like in college or whatever, because you know, you get a photo and you see that they're just old friends, which is a real thing. You start to feel you know someone long enough, it becomes like inextricable, right? And you can't say, well, you're friends anymore. You're just friends, right? Friendship is a weird thing. And I was trying to sort of like, a lot of this book was me thinking about like, you know, there's plenty of stories about there are a lot of stories of like trans romance, there's a lot of like coming out stuff. But the idea of like this weird time when you are out for a little while and you have to sort of like keep doing vibe checks with your cis friends. It's really hard and it's really weird. And it's like you're sitting around being like, do I have to fish or cut bait? You know, like it's a very strange time. It's a very weird thing to feel out. And it makes you think like, and it's just, I was just doing a lot of thinking about friendship. It's like friends with a person. It's like, is you have stuff in common? Is it the same values? Is it like some other thing? Like, you know, I don't really have an answer, but like, because it could be a million different things. There's a lot of ways for friendship to work. But I was like, I struggled a lot with getting their friendship to a place that made sense to me.
I will say in the end, the bond between Adam and Sammie, I think, was very apparent for me. That last scene.
And yeah, that last scene was where I think I got it. I think it was like, that was like, you know, you asked if I had the ending in mind. It's like I knew how it ended, but their conversation was the thing that took me a long time to get to. That was part of the struggle.
I think it seemed very, very fluid, which is wild considering everything that was going on in that scene, and just, you know, the introduction of, you know, the saving clone and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that it was just like there's a lot going on there, and I remember very specifically that scene. I have like a friend in mind, and I'm like, okay, can we get to that point? Can we get to that point? We're kind of okay.
Let's give him the book.
Yeah, let's give it voice weekends.
That's right.
Don't invite me.
Everyone should buy 2 copies. One for yourselves, one to give to your worst friend.
That's perfect.
Yes.
All right. If we've got books that we need signed, we'll go ahead and scooch up over here. I'm going to turn this guy. But once again, a very warm thank you to our wonderful
Thank you all so
guests.
much for coming. Thank you all so much.
I have copies.